Tips from Trestle is brought to you by the Belter Companies, Navigator Group Purchasing, and eMenu Choice Point of Sale. Welcome to Tips from Trestle. This podcast is dedicated to discussing the senior living industry with a unique focus on food, hospitality, and leadership. I'm your host, Aaron Fish. As a 25-year veteran of the hospitality industry, I've focused my work on creating exceptional experiences for the customers we serve. My goal for this podcast? Educate, inform, and inspire leaders in senior living to bring food and hospitality to the front of mind in our industry. Let's bring the innovative and passionate spirit of hospitality to everything that we do, for the residents, families, guests, and employees we serve each and every day. So what are we waiting for? Let's get to it. Today on Tips from Trestle, I'm joined by Nikki Jo Olsen. Nikki Jo has been in the wellness and event coordinating industry since 2010. As a certified personal trainer, group fitness trainer, functional aging specialist, and fitness studio manager, she has gained the necessary knowledge to understand and implement life enrichment wellness programs for our senior demographic. With experience as a client relations manager, office manager, resident enrichment director, and a senior director of resident experience, Nikki Jo immersed herself in the customer experience industry and refined her skills for developing and implementing creative, challenging, unique, and active programs and events while balancing exceptional customer service. Originally from Florida, she graduated from Florida State University with a bachelor's in recreational management. She now lives in Nashville with her husband and two daughters. So, Nikki Jo, thanks for joining me today on Tips from Trestle.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm excited to talk about this. You know, everybody in our industry is very focused on resident engagement. It seems to be it's a very broad topic, right? And so everybody wants to make sure they're creating that experience. And so, but before we dive in, you obviously did not start in senior living. You kind of started in a different vein, but not one that's unfamiliar. So kind of tell us a little bit about your journey into the senior living space.
Sure. So I was a personal trainer, managing fitness studios. Fitness, I've always had a passion for it. Previously, I was a cheerleader for the Miami Dolphins and dove really hard into all things physical fitness. So it just seemed natural with my background and everything to manage fitness studios here in Nashville, Tennessee. A friend approached me and was like, hey, she had worked in the senior living industry for years, in sales and different avenues, and was like, Nikki, I just really feel like that this position would work for you and that this is something that I just keep coming back. And they were starting a brand new active adult community right here in Franklin, Tennessee, and it was to become their resident enrichment director. I mulled over it for a while and was like, I don't know. And, I loved what I was doing. And then as I started digging deeper into it, it felt good. It felt like I would be able to help people in a whole being wellness, in a holistic approach, instead of just focusing on the physical aspect. And that really excited me. It felt a little bit challenging and broadening my horizons. And so I went on board. It was an active adult lease up. And so I quickly learned that I was creating a program, not just implementing one. So it was a little bit different, but I was so excited and ready for the challenge. So we leased up the community very quickly. And I was able to really build out what that well-being model looked like, what that wellness, what the programming was. And higher up, our corporates, I guess, recognize that. I was quickly promoted to then implement and to help train that programming that I had implemented around our entire portfolio. Once I got more into it, I was then promoted to all things resident experience. So it was really looking at the client journey and what does that look like, and how do we really, from our operations, from programming, from well-being, the entire cycle and journey of what our residents were going through, how could we make that experience the best of the best? And so I fell in love with it. I frequently tell people it's the blessing I didn't know I needed, and it's the passion that I didn't know I had. And
Yeah.
so I'm forever thankful for those who have introduced me to the senior living community.
One question that I've always kind of wanted to dig into a little bit is the difference between the resident experience in active adult versus kind of your more traditional independent living and assisted living. And so what would you say that looks like? How those differences, well, how they're similar? I mean, what are the thoughts on that?
There's, for me, distinct differences in the way that I say aging in place models with independent living, with assisted living, with memory care. They really do provide that care base there. That will change in the future, but providing care is a big part of that. Making sure you have the right people to implement different programming while providing those services. There's also meals in place there so that, some of those residents aren't necessarily wanting to cook. Some of them can't necessarily cook. So providing, their entire day and really serving them in that aspect. The active adult do not provide those meals nor that care that people typically need in other communities, and their demographic is different in a sense that we're finding that people over the age of 50, over the age of 55 are really looking to right size their life. And with technology and all things coming about, they want to travel more, they want to be close to their families, and they're at that retirement age. Some are still working, but they don't need a 6,000 square foot house anymore, and they just want to do what they want to do. And so in taking back that ownership, active adult communities are becoming wildly popular. I've also compared it to looking at my parents, so to speak. And I feel like our generation is doing a little bit better. But if you look at past generations, they really gave up everything and poured themselves into their kids. Some were better about it than others, but a lot of people, I say, lost touch with friends. And technology it's now coming back, but they poured everything into their children. So now when they're looking at active adult communities, it's, oh my goodness, I get to live with my friends. I get to, join social clubs and groups, and I really get to be this active, vibrant person that I've always wanted to be, or that I've always been. I just get to do it in community with like-minded people. And so those are some of the very distinct differences between maybe those independent living, assisted living, memory care versus just an active adult who just wants to be around like-minded people.
Yeah, no, it's always fascinated me, the idea of active adult. And I know there are people in the industry that are, well, we need to make active adult more like independent living. And I'm kind of like, well, yes, but you really have to kind of, like you said, the very different mindset between I want to go and live a different lifestyle or a change in my lifestyle, as opposed to, well, I probably need some additional support or help
Mm-hmm.
when you think about those other levels. Um,
Correct.
and so you've been in the industry now for quite a while. I'm
Mm-hmm.
curious, your experience obviously coming in and not really knowing a whole lot about it, but your time having been in senior living and in active adult, well, how has resident engagement changed since you first started? Today, I want to tell you about one of Tressel's senior living partners, Belter. Belter is a food service design, equipment, and supply company that has been providing expert guidance to the food and beverage industry for nearly a century. A strategic partner to the most successful food service operations in the country, Belter provides support in kitchen and bar design, equipment procurement and install, and supplies. Their team of senior living food service experts have experience across the continuum of care. From independent living to skilled nursing and CCRCs, Belter specializes in right-sizing new facilities, modernizing remodels, and providing the right food service equipment and supplies. At Belter, they are committed to creating memorable experiences for their customers and their guests. With their top-notch team and a global network of quality supplier partners, their customer-focused approach is built on a foundation of collaboration and decades of industry experience. So thank you for considering Belter for all of your food service needs.
When I first started and just learning a whole lot more about it, I was looking at a study, and it's actually coming to fruition now. And it was about the wellness and the well-being programs. And so the statistics said that by 2023, which we're now in, 50% of all senior living communities were actually going to be wellness based with care instead of care based with wellness options. And so we're living in this time that it has drastically changed. People aren't just looking at, when I'm talking about the senior living community as a whole, they're not just looking at, oh, now my, parents, my grandparents, whoever it may be, they need help. So I'm going to, we need to put them somewhere. It's how is their life going to be made better? How can we make sure that they have a whole well-being and wellness included, from the mental capacity to emotional health down to the physical health, everything involved, and then provide care, not just making sure, hey, do they have doctors and nurses that are going to make sure that whoever takes, their medicine on a daily basis, or if they fall, or if they, something happens, will be there. So that was a huge drastic shift. And I think that that's just going to exponentially grow. As a society, when we went through COVID, we realized how important wellness and well-being were, especially to our demographic. And so more people are focusing on that. That's also held up by the new person-centric models that are coming out, and making sure that we are focusing on the actual person, not just the health and checking off forms as we go along. I also believe that technology is drastically changing, and that has changed. Now there's, so many different avenues to help with our brain health, with our emotional health, with keeping people connected in different avenues. And so I think that those two are the biggest changes that we've all seen.
Yeah, I think you make a great point when you talk about like the experience coming, living through COVID and coming out of that and realizing that we can have the best healthcare aspects of our communities, but there were so many things when it comes to socialization and the interaction and how you can engage the residents that are in communities. I think that kind of opened a lot of eyes, like you said, and that 50% number is not surprising, but because I've started to see a little bit more conversation around wellness
Mm-hmm.
based versus care, but I didn't realize it was quite that high. But all great information. So
Mm-hmm.
um, when you think about as operators are looking at some of the things you just talked about, um, how do they make mistakes with that? How do they go wrong with their engagement programs? Where do you see operators making those mistakes?
So the first thing, in my opinion, is just generic programming. I do understand that coming from a corporate umbrella, you want some symmetry between your properties and your communities. And from a logistics perspective, a lot of times it is easier to just say, this is what we're doing, bullet by bullet by bullet, and keep moving forward. But that doesn't necessarily speak to each person at every community. I used to always say, communities in Atlanta, Georgia are going to be vastly different in what their wants and needs are from programming than those in Denver, Colorado. So you can't have generic programming to just say, this is what we do, this is how it is. Going back to that, how it's changing, moving back to that, person centric, and how can we really incorporate each community's own personality through our programming. So that's one thing that sometimes I see people getting a little bit wrong, if I could say. The other thing is, and I hate to keep bringing up COVID, but it kind of woke us up in my aspect from it, is too much technology. I know that technology is a great and wonderful tool, but a lot of our communities are, in my opinion, being bombarded with it, and they're being thrown at it. One of the conferences that I went to said that communities on average could have anywhere between 60 and 250 different technologies within their building. I mean,
Wow.
but when you really break that down, that comes from key cards to, the gate access, to remote control garage door openers, um, to the screens, that are providing programming within the community, not even going into then, you have your CRM systems, your operating systems, how people go online to pay their bills. So it's not necessarily just with programming, it's with every aspect of what they're doing. And if those technologies aren't talking to each other, not only our employees and our teammates who are on site, our staff members, but our residents are also becoming very frustrated. And why do I have to download another app? So I have to download this, and then I'm going into the TV, the media rooms, and it's completely different than the, technology that I'm using in my creative art studio. And so that to me is also a huge miss, that we're not looking at the data and what we can actually do to help our residents in providing a more simplistic model of that technology. And we're just kind of throwing things at people. But I also see that that is going to be a big change in the community, in the industry coming up.
Yeah, I mean, I think, it's that mindset of, when someone's moving into a community, right, they're wanting to simplify their lives a little bit, right? Like you talked about the 6,000 square foot house, like I don't need to take care of this anymore. And that's one of the things we sell, right? Like let us help you make your life a little more simple. Yet here we are on the back end, like here's the new app and here's this, and you got to log in here. And oh, by the way, download this. I can definitely see the bombardment of that. You mentioned the generic aspect of programs, and I've struggled with this when it comes to food, right? Because said like cuisines are regional, and so things need to be different. How do you, when you look at it from a corporate perspective, how do you combat that? How can you create a corporate framework that allows some of the things you're talking about to happen at a community level, but still kind of maintain the, as I call them, the guardrails of your program?
Navigator is the largest full-service GPO that exclusively focuses on the senior living community. And what that means is we provide products and services that help our members provide a great environment for their residents, such as like MRO, hospitality equipment, food, business products, as well as technology solutions. We actually surround our members with a level of support unmatched in the industry.
So for me, that comes down to how you set up your programming. And gonna give a little secret away, but it's only mine. I made this up. I look at programming as a cupcake. And maybe that sounds silly, but I always have. And I do believe that there are some things that are going to be similar and things that are going to be standard or generic, if you will. But to me, that's your core of your programming and what you really want to offer. So maybe that is a continental breakfast, or we always make sure to have a happy hour or a social hour, or this is how many, monthly meetings we're going to have, or whatever that may be. This is how many fitness classes, because this is what's regulated or recommended by the CDC, or, for active older adults, whatever that may be. Those core classes are the base of your cupcake. And that's to me where the standardization can come from a corporate level. From there, you really have to dive into getting that icing on the top, and teaching your leaders how to really engage your residents. They want to lead things. We as humans have a need within us that we need that fulfilled. I go back to an example of just me, my mom, and I say my nanny, my grandmother. I am well into my 30s, and every time I go home, my mother wants to do my laundry. And I'm like, Mom, I have 2 kids. Like, we got this. If I need to do laundry, I'll do it. But I have to step back because she wants to take care of us. That's a need that she has. When we go to my grandmother's house, my nanny's house, she wants to cook for us. And we're like, Nanny, calm down. Like, let's take you out to dinner. Like, let's treat you. And my mom is always like, y'all, like, she wants to do this for us. Like, let her do this. That's a need. We don't need to take that away from her. And so for me, that is the icing. How can you get your residents and meet their needs? And that is how it's different in all communities. You need to really figure out what that is for those residents specifically. And then comes the sprinkles on top. And that's where you really encourage and invite your leaders and those lifestyle leaders, resident enrichment leaders, to be creative, tap into their brain and give them the empowerment to sprinkle on whatever they want to. Is that every one of them is very different in their talents and, you know, how they do things. And so if they're great at coming up with fun games for people, that's wonderful. If their great talent is artwork and they love leading creative arts classes, do it. If they're a wonderful party planner, let them do it. But those are the sprinkles that only can come from that lifestyle coordinator and how they're implementing it. So that's my cupcake approach, and how you can still be cohesive while each cupcake is a little bit different.
No, I think that's a great analogy, right? It's perfect for it. And it makes a lot of sense too, right? Like, you've got to have those core pieces, but outside of that, like, let them be them and kind of create what needs to be done. So, I love it. As you think about, looking into the future of resident engagement, what are some of the trends that you and some of your counterparts in the industry are starting to see, or starting to engage with? How is your work being impacted by these trends?
Definitely. So some of them we've already touched on a little bit, but we can go into a little bit more depth. But one is resident-led programming. I know that that's always been there. It's not something new that people are coming up with, but how you're implementing it and how you are getting buy-in from your residents is also the key. And I think that that's going to change drastically as people see that our seniors and our active adults want to be so included. I feel like previously we just kind of wanted to do programming and this is what you do, and just kind of I've always hated the word activity because I feel like it's just busy work, so to speak. Like, oh, here's this, just take care of it. And so really getting our residents involved in that and helping them to lead programs and to take things on. We now have communities that have complete woodworking sheds so that, residents can take advantage of that. It's not just bingo and Bible club. There's such a wide variety of what residents can do and how they want to implement it. We also come from this new generation has such a vast background of, teachers, and we have communities with NASA scientists living in them. Their knowledge is incredible. And so tapping into that to really provide those programming opportunities that they want to. Another one that we talked about was the technology. I really feel like the simplified technology is what's really coming. And I believe that our communities are wanting and craving that. And I believe that if you're a technology provider, if you can simplify technology for those communities and get systems to interact and integrate with each other, that's going to be the key. And those companies are going to be the ones that are going to skyrocket from there. And then, like we talked about before, intentional programming. So really looking at what specifically does our community need, not just throwing things at them, being really intentional about where we're implementing things and how we're implementing them.
Yeah. On the resident-led piece, do you think that that's evolving because of kind of the shift in the types of residents we're getting? We're looking at older boomers now as the primary audience versus silent generation that we started working with 10, 15 years ago. Are they driving that, or is this more of as an industry, we just kind of see the trends and go, well, we're going to get this, let's start doing it now?
I definitely think that the boomer generation is driving this versus the silent generation. I recently did a whole deep dive on, who our current customers are. And it's interesting to me that the millennial generation is often coined the me generation, because they're not. The boomers started that.
Yeah,
and I mean, they really did. And if you think about it, they were the first ones to, really be able to pick what cable provider they wanted to, and to customize their new build house, and, all of these things. It was all about me and what can I have, and how it affected my life and the choices that came about. So when they're coming into senior living, they want choices. They want to know what's in it for me. And partially I say, yes, that maybe that's a selfish mentality, but they're not looking at it from that aspect. And I don't mean the word selfish in a negative tone. I'm saying, what is my wellness going to look like? What is my well-being going to look like by moving into this community? How active can I be? How social can I be? What are things that are going to keep me thriving in this? And so I mean it as a positive way, not in any type of negative way.
Yeah, no, it's almost like I think of it a little bit around like the value proposition, right? Like, what's the value of this community going to be for me on my resident engagement, my wellness journey? Like, is it going to meet those, the social, physical, emotional, all those needs? Am I going to be able to find it here? And I wonder if, our marketing teams do a good enough job sometimes of sharing those messages. And so I think the more this gets out there and the more we put these kinds of programs and this kind of thinking forward, I think the prospective residents are going to start making those decisions for us and how we have to help. So,
and I also feel like the boomer generation just has a need to share with others. So, they're not shy about, helping others or leading classes or taking charge on things. And so that's also part of the driving force.
Yeah, no, great point. So, Nikki Jo, as we kind of come to our end of our time here, I wanted to have you become a resident engagement prognosticator. Um, Tell us what you think resident engagement is going to look like over, say, the next 2 or 3 years. What do you see coming? What's going to really make an impact on what we're doing? And how can we meet the needs of these boomers that are starting to come into our communities?
Definitely. Well, I think there's a lot of evidence around senior living in general. I believe with the active adults and just with engagement in general, that it's really going to become evidence-based. The last few years, we've been pulling all of this data together and figuring out what are the likes, what are the dislikes, and really learning who that target demographic is. And so I feel like instead of just throwing things out there, that it's really going to become evidence data driven as far as why we're doing things the way that we need to, specifically with this new demographic. I also think that in person versus just throwing technology is going to come back around. Our demographic and just people, humans in general, don't want just technology solutions. They want those in-person, inclusive, but I believe that the technology is going to shift so that maybe for an aging in place community where we're doing, a yoga class in the studio, maybe somebody who's in their room can't attend for whatever reason. And so, but they can join in on a Zoom or on some technology platform. We're moving in that direction to provide that inclusive so that it hits every single resident within the communities. And then really, I say broader programming. Our seniors are ever changing. And I think the days of just offering bingo and book club or bingo and Bible are gone. And people really need to look at that and expand their horizons when it comes to who's moving into our senior living communities. And so with that, think about rock climbing, think about pickleball, think about, different things that I say typically you wouldn't necessarily associate with the senior living community, but that's what our residents are craving and wanting. And so I really think that those out of the box ideas are going to really become prevalent within our programming in the next few years.
Do you think that broader programming is going to cause some specialization around communities where maybe it's, this community focuses on someone who's really active. So like rock climbing and pickleball, maybe that's that person. But then maybe over here, you've got more of a, I don't know, intellectual university style where maybe they offer more of a traditional, like here's a bunch of like courses and learning and things like that. You think we'll see that kind of specialization as we get further along?
Definitely. And I think we're already seeing it. I mean, look at Margaritaville and, the whole Jimmy Buffett community. That's very specific to a lifestyle that they want to live. And it's sold out to my knowledge. I know that Disney is building a whole active adult community, in California. Being, those neat niche communities and, really focusing on specifics, I think that that's huge. And that's going to definitely become very prevalent.
Yeah, no, the whole resident engagement like aspect of what we do is so fascinating to me because I working in the food and hospitality piece of it, like that was always something that I knew was important, and I always tried to get teams to embrace. And so it's great to see that we're starting to look a little bit more holistic around what's the community experience as opposed to like you said, food and activities and kind of solo
Just
or
checking off the
siloing.
boxes.
Exactly. So, well, Nikki Jo, this has been great. This great conversation, great insights. And so, how can the listeners learn more about what you do, your work? How can they reach out and speak with you about all of this great stuff?
Definitely. So the best way is either on LinkedIn or to email me. And my email is just Nikki Jo, Nikkijo Olsen, Olsen at gmail.com, my full name. And I'm really just consulting for the senior living industry. I do have prevalent specifically in active adult, but it radiates throughout all of senior living. So I'm working with different management companies. I'm consulting with both owners and investors on future potential properties. And figuring out the works and different things within how to manage that senior living community, everything from operations to sales and marketing, and of course the resident experience. So I would love to help any and all, and just reach out.
Perfect. Well, Nikki Jo, like I said, this has been a great conversation. I think we're going to continue to see more and more around resident engagement. So thank you so much for joining me today on Tips from Trestle.
Of course. Thank you so much.
So there you have it, another one in the books. Thanks again, everybody, for listening. Please follow, like, and subscribe on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, or wherever you get your podcasts, and follow us on Twitter at Tips from Trestle. You can also learn more about the work I do by following me on LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, and even TikTok. And be sure to check out Trestle Hospitality Concepts at www.trestlehospitalityconcepts.com. I'm your host, Aaron Fish, and this has been another episode of Tips from Trestle.